ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another broadcast of The Weekly with me, Neff. Please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with a couple of family members, friends, and colleagues. I appreciate the continued support. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Batman 2 and a potential huge theory that I think leads into the Court of Owls being the main villain of the second film. A lot of things have been coming out as far as news regarding the Batman. Obviously, this film is supposed to begin shooting early next year. It's going to be interesting to see if the Warner Brothers Netflix deal has anything to do, or will it disrupt the production of the Batman 2, which is slated for October 2027, correct? But the film is supposed to start shooting sometime in the first quarter of next year. And last night, I was actually watching the Batman once again. And I've seen this film no less than 5 or 6 times, so it might be my 7th time. I've talked about this theory with a couple of colleagues of mine off the mic, and I think there's a lot of things in that film that I noticed this time around that were more apparent to me that kind of flow into the theory that I'm going to be talking about as far as the Court of Owls. Also, I wanted to speak on the Scarlett Johansson casting, which I do feel, I don't want to say it's 100% accurate that she has been casted into this film. Personally, I thought the casting was a little odd, to be quite honest. Scarlett Johansson does have the name to be in a film of this caliber, but I don't know if her acting chops are there, to be quite honest. And she's been in a lot of notable action films and just films in general. And so I think if she can't take it there as far as her acting ability, it's going to be hard to differentiate her away from those other films. But I do feel like there is a role in particular that she could be in that would make a lot of sense. She wouldn't be relegated to just being a side character, which I have heard some theories regarding that. And we'll talk about some of those theories. This would be a main role, possibly the Grand Master of the Court of Owls, Samantha Vanaver. I feel like this role makes the most sense for Scarlett Johansson if she is 100% casted in this film. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But let's talk about the Batman, some of the clues that I did notice in that film before I even watched it last night, and watching it last night along with the Penguin as well, because there are some clues there in that show that came out after the Batman. And remember, the Penguin takes place chronologically. It takes place 1 week after the events of the Batman. So let's just talk about a couple things that I saw in the Batman that made a lot of sense. There was things shown and there was things said. So in the first act of the Batman, right, the Batman, he obviously goes to see the crime scene of the first victim of the Riddler that we see on screen, right? And so once he makes his entrance, you see him doing his investigatory work, right? He's walking around the crime scene, analyzing, room full of cops. Everyone's looking at him because he seems out of place there with Lieutenant Gordon. And then another cop walks up next to him and Lieutenant Gordon, and he hands him a letter. Apparently there was a letter for the Batman there already. So once the letter is opened, you notice that there's an owl on the front of the card. And I believe the moniker on the front says, "From your friend who." You have the owl on the front. Obviously, the Riddler does speak in riddle, so it does align with him. But it's also a slick way to make a connection with an organization that's even above him. Because if you remember watching the Batman, they never really explain how the Riddler comes to power. It's not that he's the biggest crime lord or crime boss in Gotham at that point, but he does have a little bit of power. He has followers. Obviously, he's using social media to drum up anarchy. And so he does have a following, and he's able to make waves even without any prior buildup or explanation to how he's able to even get on the Batman's radar. Now, with that statement, let me preface it with, there was, I believe, a comic prior to the movie coming out. I believe it's prior to the movie coming out that kind of show you the events that lead up to the live action movie that I do have to look into. And possibly, maybe there were some things in that comic that did kind of show, okay, the Riddler's around, this is the lead up, but it wasn't live action. So if you didn't see that and you're just watching the movie for what it is, it kind of just seems like the Riddler pops up. I don't think it's so far-fetched to think that maybe the Riddler was given information to find the particular victim, the first victim, obviously, of the film. I also don't think it's impossible to believe that there's an organization behind the Riddler the whole time, and they're using the Riddler pretty much as a pawn. And so that was the first event that stuck out to me. Throughout the film, there's a couple other events, but they are spaced out. There's a lot of references to a maze of some sort, a maze of this. The Riddler uses what they call a maze when they discover some of his entrapments and tools in his apartment. There's a lot of references there. I do think the maze reference is figurative use of the word in itself. Also, I do think it is foreshadowing in a sense. If you recall the events of Batman Volume 2, Issue 5, where Bruce Wayne actually gets stuck in one of the Court of Owl's labyrinths in the sewers of Gotham for a few days and goes through a bunch of events trying to get out of that. Now, a maze can also be seen as a labyrinth, and I think they use that word very intelligently throughout the film to kind of point to that possibly being an event in the future, and I think that will lead into the Batman 2, in which I can read a little more of the description for you to kind of give you insight on what actually happened during that issue. He's trapped by the court's assassins, Talons, and forced to navigate a psychological maze filled with illusions, including seeing his parents, all to break him before he finds the real court. The maze isn't a physical puzzle in the comics, but a twisted reality designed by the court to prove their control over Gotham's history and Batman's mind, making him feel like a trespasser. And I'll post some images up so you guys can see that. So I do think that is another clue that was in that first Batman film. Now, I want to reference the District Attorney Gil Colson from the Batman, right? So before he gets his head blown off in front of the crowd there, and this is during a memorial service, when Bruce Wayne enters the church or the cathedral, whatever you'd like to call it, I noticed that he's walking around, he's scoping out the place, he looks up in the banisters, and obviously you do have the Riddler there. You do know it's the Riddler even though they don't show him, right? Shadowy figure. And other shadowy figures as well, you could just pass it off as people that are just there to participate at the memorial, or you could say, based off how that shot is set up, it's a group of people that have no face. All you see is the darkness there, and so they're all watching Bruce Wayne, it would seem, from that shot as he looks up towards them, reminiscent of a group of individuals that have their eyes on Bruce as he looks up, not knowing who they are. They're in the shadows, and the Court of Owls basically acts as the Illuminati in Gotham. So I thought that, from an artistic standpoint, made a lot of sense and was a slight reference. Once again, let's go back to District Attorney Gil Colson. As soon as he does appear in this scene, right, he has the bomb on his neck, also has a phone attached to his hand in which there are some riddles given through the phone to Batman and him through the Riddler, right, through FaceTime, you could call it. And there's questions that they have to answer. But then before he blows up, right, you have Bruce Wayne questioning him on the corruption in the city, trying to get answers, really trying to save his life before the bomb does explode. And in About a Fear, Gil Colson basically says, you know, there's a big systemic issue regarding Gotham and a lot of people in power within Gotham, stating that there's a lot of corruption. And he also states that the corruption is much larger in scale than even Batman could imagine. Now, to me, that points to an organization that's really controlling and pulling the strings. They try to pass it off as Carmine Falcone being the guy who is the front runner and the leader of all this corruption, but anybody that knows that, anybody that's in the spotlight is not the one that's actually controlling anything. And so they try to pass it off as Carmine down in there, but to me, it really stuck out as someone that's pulling the strings behind the scenes that you don't know is in the film yet, or that you haven't seen. They haven't uncovered their real identities. And to me, when I think of organizations like that, it goes into some of what people will call a conspiracy theory, but the Masonry, Illuminati, characters of that sort, which would fit the bill for the Court of Owls. And also, Colson seems to be in fear of what could happen to his family, knowing that he's about to die. If it was Carmine Falcone who was the guy pulling the strings all along, he probably would not have bit his tongue at that point in time because he knows what's going to happen to him. Now, for him to be so scared to be worried about everybody that he's connected to, take away the mob figure, he is a threat. But I think the Court of Owls makes a lot of sense, seeing as how they control everything, and he does know that, being the district attorney, but can never speak on it because he has sworn to an oath of silence. And so that was an observation of mine as well. I want to point towards the event that leads to Alfred being attacked. Really, the note was for Batman, of course, but the message was sent as an assassination attempt and also an attempt to blow up Wayne's new headquarters, correct? And so they don't show the letter being, like the front of the letter is not opened by Alfred, right? You obviously see him take the letter out. Then he notices that there's something off with the letter. He sees that it says fireproof on the back, throws it because he hears the ticking out of the box, right? It's wrapped in green, has the black bow on it. And then Alfred is essentially blown up, not killed, but blown up and injured, right? And so once Bruce arrives to the scene, obviously he's not in his Batman gear or garb, right? He's once again looking around. The cops are there. He's being interviewed and they give him a letter. Obviously, the letter is for him, to the Batman. As soon as the police officer opens up the letter on the front, color is green, the card's green, and there's two eyes right in the middle of the letter. Big, bright yellow eyes with a small pupil in the middle. And to me, it's reminiscent of an owl. In the contents of the letter, it doesn't really add up to anything, but it does say, "See you in hell." And if I can find some images, I'll put those up on the screen as well. And hell could be multiple things, right? This could be figurative. It could be literal. Maybe another pointing to the maze or the labyrinth being like being stuck in hell. And so that was another interesting piece of information that I feel like could tie in and be some foreshadowing as well. How does the Riddler always have these riddles that are reminiscent of an owl and imagery? What are the connections? How does he know this much about Bruce Wayne already? Because the Riddler does know that Bruce Wayne is Batman at this point. They have a banter back and forth when Riddler is caught and put into Arkham. There's also a deleted scene as well in the film with the Joker, where the Batman is talking to the Joker, trying to get information on the Riddler. And the Joker seems to not be answering the questions straight to him. He's more wondering how he doesn't know certain things, how he feels, why he's not approaching the Riddler a certain way, and he's trying to get into Batman's mind. He's playing mind games, but the Joker's obviously in Arkham prior to the events of the Riddler showing up, so that's very interesting as well. What does the Joker know that he's not telling the Batman? Obviously, him and the Batman have a relationship. This is Batman year 2, so what happened in the year prior? And so that'd be interesting as well, but it's not part of the film. It's a deleted scene. It doesn't necessarily point to the Court of Owls, but I did think the banter back and forth was interesting. And so with that information there, I do think, like I said, little tidbits that could lead into a bigger villain to play into the rest of this trilogy of Matt Reeves, the Batman, but I do believe the evidence is there for a Court of Owls reveal. We talked about Scarlett Johansson. The reason why I could see her being Samantha Vanaver is because, like I referenced earlier, Samantha Vanaver is the Grand Master of the Court of Owls. And we can read into a little bit of background of this character because she's not a character that's a huge character in Batman. And so it's a character that, once again, with the Court of Owls being characters that are kind of obscure as well, you have to look a little more into. Samantha Vanaver was a wealthy woman whose family, like the Waynes, had positions of influence in Gotham for hundreds of years. So once again, this is showing that this family has systemic power and economic power in Gotham. She was secretly the Grand Master of the Court of Owls and the lover of Talon. If you recall in the Batman, a lot of references to family history, the Waynes in particular, and Arkham, but is there another part that we haven't seen in the film as well? Maybe another part that's not being disclosed. You're talking about history there, so it does make sense. Samantha Vanaver is the heiress to the Vanavers, a wealthy family in Gotham City. For generations, the Vanavers have led and controlled the Court of Owls. Her father recruited and trained a boy to become the next Talon. The boy and Samantha grew up together. Vanaver fell in love with him and saw potential for greatness. Eventually, Samantha Vanaver took over leadership of the court as the next Grand Master. Coincidentally, she targeted Bruce Wayne for membership and chose Robin to replace Talon as the general of the court's soon-to-be army of resurrected warriors at the same time. And so just a little background on that character. Now, Scarlett Johansson has the blonde hair look going on there. I do think the age range is appropriate, right? About mid to late 30s, possibly even early 40s. Very classy look, short hair. She could pull that off. And like I said, I feel like this role is pivotal enough to where she's not being relegated to being a side character. I've heard theories about her possibly being the Mask of the Phantasm, also being Harvey Dent's wife, if they decide to go in those two different routes. I don't think she's going to be Andrea Beaumont. It just doesn't really seem like it makes sense at this point in time. Also, for the Mask of the Phantasm, you'd have to establish the Joker. He is a big part of that animated film, if you ever saw that, and that story. Then you have to tie in Andrea Beaumont with being a former lover of Bruce Wayne. If you know anything about this version of Bruce Wayne, Robert Pattinson playing the character, it doesn't really seem like he's interested in that part of his life. So it'd be very interesting to see where she would fit in, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think a lot of people like it because obviously it brings up nostalgia. I think it is pushing the edge of fantastical at that point in time, but still grounded enough to where it could be done. Also, Scarlett Johansson in the red hair. Also, Andre Beaumont, kind of a menacing character as the titular Phantasm, and so I don't think that Scarlett Johansson has that body type or would be believable in that role, although I do believe Matt Reeves could pull off a lot of things there. So I don't think it's going to be Andrea Beaumont. Obviously, we talked about Samantha Vanaver, which makes most sense to me and ties into everything else we know about the Court of Owls and the Batman and the potential direction of the film. What other characters? Vicky Vale? I don't think it's going to be Vicky Vale, and I certainly don't think it's going to be Poison Ivy. Once again, you're getting into the lane of fantastical. I think Matt Reeves definitely wants to steer away from that. Even with the Penguin, he's a real person, a mob boss at this point in time, not the mutant that you saw Danny DeVito play in The Batman Returns. So I think all the fantastical characters are going to be out there. We're looking at more of the grounded characters and the options. So I believe overall there's 4 potential options there, right? You have Samantha Vanaver, Andrea Beaumont, Poison Ivy, and then you have Vicky Vale. And I think, in my opinion, that Samantha Vanaver makes the most sense for Scarlett Johansson, and it also makes the most sense as far as her having a major role in this next film if she is 100% casted in the film. Another theory that I do want to talk about, and it's going to be brief, was the theory that she's going to be Harvey Dent's wife, Gilda Dent. And so there is going to be a need for a new DA in Gotham, obviously, with Coulson being assassinated there. But Gilda Dent, once again, in my opinion, it follows the Batman The Long Halloween. It wouldn't necessarily make her a main character in the film. And I just feel like when you're getting someone of Scarlett Johansson's caliber, and when I say caliber, I'm talking about popularity, you're not going to relegate her to being the wife of Harvey Dent. Could you? You could, but it could be a waste of a casting there. And so that's another theory that I heard swirling around. And then if you follow The Long Halloween, you got to understand that this follows the holiday killer. Now, what holiday would this be? More than likely Halloween. Well, Halloween already passed, and the Batman, we're a week out from that and 2 weeks out from that. If you look at after, basically when I say 2 weeks out, I'm talking about between the Batman, the Penguin, and then the Batman Part 2, because all of this is supposed to be happening back to back chronologically. So I don't think that's going to make sense either. And now the last bit of information that I wanted to present before concluding this video on my theory for the Court of Owls being the villain for the Batman 2 and potentially the rest of this trilogy is the reference in the Penguin. Now, for the most part, the Penguin focuses on Oz Cobb, obviously what's going on with Kristen Milioti, Sophia Falcone, and the families there. It focuses on him a lot, but I do believe, I want to say it's possibly the 8th episode or maybe the 7th episode of the season. There is some discourse between Oz Cobb and someone that's in the Justice Department, and he's going to cut a deal to get Sophia Falcone taken in. It's going to give him essentially diplomatic immunity at this point in time, so he gives information. Now, he actually ends up walking into court, and when he walks into court, if you actually look around, and the picture's up on the screen right now, you can see what looks to be reminiscent of owls surrounding him in the background of the court. Very interesting there. So another tidbit there letting you know that this is a potential connection to the Court of Owls. This one is probably the most not subtle out of all of the little tidbits that I talked about in this video. Obviously, the cards are pretty subtle there, but the owl on that first card that the Batman does get in the Batman regarding the Riddler's first victim is pretty upfront. But this is very interesting. And like I said, the Penguin happens 1 week after the events of the Batman. And so you can see the picture right here where you do have the owls draped in the curtains surrounding Oz Cobb. So a very slick reference there. And ladies and gents, that's where we are at right now with the Batman and my Court of Owls theory for them being the potential villain in the next film. I think it makes the most sense. Obviously, Matt Reeves said he wanted to bring characters to the forefront live action that you've never seen before. And what better would this be? I think the Court of Owls fits Matt Reeves' universe so much, so dark, so visceral, so grounded. And I feel like the Illuminati spin is very interesting as well. And also a way for this Bruce Wayne, because he's really like a detective, to really sink his teeth into figuring out who is running Gotham. Maybe there's things that he doesn't know. Obviously, they point to it in the Batman, but this will really expound on it. And I feel like this makes a lot of sense. Also bringing in Scarlett Johansson to play more of a major role. What better than to have Scarlett Johansson be the Grandmaster of the Court of Owls? I think that'd be very interesting as well. Ladies and gents, let me know what you thought about this theory. What do you think about the Batman 2? Who do you think is going to be the main villain? What do you think Scarlett Johansson's role is going to be? Obviously, the film is in very early development, pre-production, going to be shooting earlier this upcoming year in 2026, and more information will come out. But I do feel like this theory makes a lot of sense. I think it's solid, but I want to hear some thoughts from others. Ladies and gents, please like this video, share this video. I appreciate the support. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications. Going to be some more cool videos coming up in the future. This was just a think piece of mine that I wanted to talk about. But other than that, that's all I got for today. Be safe. It's Neff signing off.